After our dad's funeral, my sister didn't call me. She didn't ask for help privately. She wrote in the family group chat that she deserved my entire salary for the month because she cried harder. At first, I thought grief was just talking, but what followed wasn't just grief. It was something much older, something that had been building between us for years. My sister didn't say it quietly. She didn't text me privately. She didn't wait until the house was empty. She wrote it in the family group chat. I deserve your salary this month. I cried harder at Dad's funeral. I stared at my phone for a long time before I even scrolled up to see if I'd missed context. I hadn't. The message was sitting there between my mom asking if anyone had gotten home safely and my aunt posting a black heart emoji. I remember thinking, grief makes people say strange things. But this wasn't strange. It was calculated. The funeral had been that morning. Cold gray sky. The kind that feels intentionally heavy. The cemetery grass still damp from overnight rain. My mother held my arm the entire service like she was afraid the ground might shift beneath her. Emily cried, loudly, not fake, not theatrical, just loud. Sharp, full-body sobs that made people turn. I didn't cry like that. I stood next to the casket and felt something tighter, quieter, like a slow collapse happening internally. My dad and I didn't do emotional displays. We did repairs, taxes, quiet favors. Emily and Dad talked more. They shared things. She called him about relationship drama, about parenting stress, about everything. I handled logistics. When Dad's heart failed 2 weeks earlier, I was the one who drove to the hospital at 2 a.m. Emily arrived 30 minutes later, shaking, already crying. When the doctors explained there wasn't much they could do, she clung to my mom. I stepped into the hallway and made calls. I always made calls. Funeral home, insurance, his accountant, the bank. I didn't think about who was grieving more. I thought about what needed to be done. Now, hours after we buried him, my sister had turned grief into a measurement. I lost more, she added in the next message. The typing bubble appeared and disappeared 3 times before she continued. You don't even show emotion. You just handle paperwork. That's not the same. The group chat had 7 people in it. Mom, me, Emily, 2 aunts, an uncle, and our cousin Rachel. No one replied immediately. That silence felt louder than the funeral. I typed, "What are you talking about?" Deleted it, typed, "Emily, this isn't the time." Deleted that too. She kept going. "I'm serious. I'm barely functioning. I can't work like this." "You can. You're fine. Fine." The word sat strangely in my chest. Fine meant sleeping 3 hours a night, sorting through Dad's old emails at 1 a.m., discovering he had a small outstanding medical bill he never mentioned, learning he'd quietly taken money from his savings to help Emily last year when her business dipped. Fine meant I hadn't let myself stop moving yet. My phone buzzed again. "I deserve your salary this month. You owe me that much." Oh, there it was. Not "can you help?" Not "I'm struggling." "Oh," I finally replied. "Oh, you what?" 3 dots appeared instantly. "You know what I mean?" "No, I don't." She sent a voice message. I didn't play it immediately. I stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering. Then I pressed it. Her voice was raw, uneven. "You always act like you're above everything, like you're the stable one. But I was closer to him. I talked to him every day. You just handled things. You don't feel it the way I do." I closed my eyes. The accusation wasn't new. Growing up, Emily was the emotional center. If she cried, everyone stopped. If she struggled, everyone rallied. If I struggled, I was told I'd figure it out. Not maliciously, just naturally. I was the steady one. Dad used to clap me on the shoulder and say, "You'll be fine, Dan. You always are." He meant it as confidence. It became expectation. Back in the chat, Emily typed again. I had to watch him fade. I had to sit there and hold his hand. So did I. I just didn't narrate it. "You make more than me. You're not married. You don't have kids. 1 month won't hurt you." The practical justification layered over the emotional claim. There it was. It wasn't just about grief. It was about math. I scrolled up through the chat. Mom hadn't said anything. Rachel finally wrote, "Maybe we should all rest tonight." Emily ignored her. "I'm serious, Daniel." The use of my full name meant escalation. "I can't go back to work like nothing happened." I typed slowly. "I'm not going back like nothing happened either." "You're already back in work mode," she shot back. "You handled the bills, the insurance, the arrangements. You don't stop." Because someone had to. I didn't write that. Instead, I asked the question I already knew the answer to. "How much do you think I make in a month?" She replied with a number. It was lower than reality, but not by much. "You want that transferred to you?" I asked. "Yes." No hesitation, as if she'd already pictured it, as if she'd already justified it. You owe me that, she repeated. I carried more of him emotionally. Carried more of him emotionally. The phrase made something inside me go very still. Dad and I didn't say, I love you easily. We said, need help with that? We said, drive safe. We said, let me know if you need anything. The last thing he said to me in the hospital wasn't poetic. It was, make sure your mom's okay. And I said, I will. Emily cried over him. I promised him things. Both were grief. Different shapes. Same weight. But in her mind, the louder shape counted more. My phone buzzed again. If you don't help me, that says everything. There it was. Not just a request. A test. I could already feel the narrative forming. Daniel wouldn't even support his sister after Dad died. I leaned back in my chair and looked around my apartment. Stacks of paperwork still on the table. Dad's old watch sitting beside my laptop. The funeral invoice folded neatly under a paperweight. I hadn't told anyone I'd paid it in full. I hadn't mentioned the extra $4,300 medical bill I cleared quietly. I hadn't said a word about transferring money to Mom to cover the mortgage for the next 2 months so she could breathe. Because that's what I do. I handle things. I don't announce them. Emily typed again. Say something. I stared at the screen. And for the first time since Dad died, I felt something sharper than grief. Not anger. Not yet. Something colder. Something like recognition. This wasn't about who cried harder. This was about who she believed I was allowed to be, and who she believed she was allowed to demand from. I finally typed, I'm not sending you my salary. The chat went silent. 3 dots appeared, stopped, appeared again. You're unbelievable, she wrote. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my banking app. Not to flex, not to threaten, just to look at the numbers. Because for the first time, I realized this conversation wasn't about money. It was about a lifetime of unspoken roles. And I wasn't sure I was willing to keep playing mine. The silence in the group chat didn't last long. It never does when emotion is mixed with audience. Emily sent another voice message. This one wasn't raw, it was steadier, sharper. You always do this. You hide behind numbers and logic. This isn't about money, Daniel, it's about support. I listened to it twice, because she was right about one thing. It wasn't just about money, but it also wasn't just about grief. Before I could respond, my mom finally typed, please, not tonight. That was her move. Contain, de-escalate, avoid. Emily ignored her. You don't understand what it was like for me, she wrote. He told me things he didn't tell you. That one hit. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I knew it was probably true. Dad opened up to her more emotionally. He asked me about taxes and retirement planning. He asked her how she was feeling. Different lanes, same road. But Emily had always equated emotional intimacy with depth, and practical support with detachment. You think writing checks equals love? She continued. I exhaled slowly, because that accusation wasn't new either. Growing up, Emily got comfort. I got responsibility. When Dad lost his job briefly during the recession, I was 16. He sat me down and explained the situation calmly. We went over the household budget together. He told me we'd be okay. He didn't tell Emily until months later. She found out accidentally and cried for hours. He comforted her. I helped him update his resume. Different kinds of closeness, neither more valid. But in Emily's narrative, one counted more. Back in the present, my phone buzzed again. You didn't even cry today, she wrote. That one felt unfair. I did, I typed, just not the way you do. That's convenient. It's different. You're always different, she shot back. Always detached. Detached. If she knew how many times I'd replayed Dad's last hospital breath in my head, she wouldn't use that word so casually. But I wasn't about to perform grief to prove legitimacy. Rachel finally stepped in. Guys, this isn't helping Mom. Mom still hadn't said anything else. I imagined her sitting at the kitchen table, phone face down, trying to hold herself together. Emily sent another message. I gave up work for 3 days. I'm losing income. You're not. I looked at the calendar. I'd taken 5 days off, 3 unpaid, because year-end work was already tight, but I hadn't mentioned it. Because I don't narrate my sacrifices. That's my flaw. Silence gets interpreted as absence. I covered the funeral deposit, I typed. The chat paused. You what? Emily replied. I paid the deposit. She didn't answer immediately. Then, why didn't you say anything? Because it needed to be paid. That's not the point, she wrote quickly. But it was exactly the point. I could feel the dynamic shifting slightly, not dramatically, but enough. You think money solves everything, she continued. You always did. No, I replied. I think bills still exist even when we're grieving. That one landed harder than I expected. She didn't respond for almost a full minute. Then she pivoted. You know what? Fine. Forget the salary. Just send me something. There it was. The recalibration. It wasn't about the exact number. It was about validating the demand. If I don't, I asked, then I'll know exactly how much I matter to you. And that's when the pattern snapped into focus. This wasn't grief talking. This was leverage. Grief was just the stage. Emily has always been good at emotional framing. When we were kids, if she broke something, she cried first. The conversation became about her feelings, not the broken thing. It wasn't malicious. It was instinctive, and over time, it worked. Teachers gave extensions. Friends forgave debts. Family softened boundaries. Now she was trying it with me. But I wasn't 16 anymore, and Dad wasn't here to balance the scale. I looked at the group chat participants again. Aunts, uncle, cousin, witnesses. Emily wasn't just asking me privately. She was asserting a narrative publicly. Daniel doesn't feel as much. Daniel makes more. Daniel should compensate. It was a clean equation in her head. I'm not transferring money because you cried harder, I wrote. She sent back one word. Wow. Then, you're cold. I'm grieving too. Not like I am. There it was again, the measurement, as if grief had a volume setting. I could feel frustration rising now. Not explosive, just steady. You want help? I typed slowly. Ask for help, don't demand it. That's exactly what I'm doing. No, you're attaching a condition to it. She didn't respond. Instead, my aunt chimed in. Maybe Daniel could just help a little. This has been hard on Emily. There it was. Reinforcement. The dynamic expanding. I didn't blame my aunt. From the outside, it probably looked simple. Emotional sister struggling. Financially stable brother. Help would equal harmony. But harmony built on manipulation doesn't last. I've already helped, I wrote. How? Emily demanded immediately. I stared at that question. How? Because she genuinely didn't know. She didn't know about the hospital bill. She didn't know about the funeral balance. She didn't know about the mortgage transfer to Mom. She didn't know because I never announced it, because I didn't want points. But now silence was being weaponized against me. You don't know everything I've done this month, I replied. Then say it, she shot back. Prove it. Prove it. That word felt heavy, as if my grief needed documentation, as if love needed receipts. I opened my banking app again, not out of anger, out of clarity. Line items. Funeral home, $8,750. Medical balance, $4,312. Mortgage transfer, $2,000. Utility catch-up, $380. Total outgoing in 3 weeks, more than the salary she wanted. I stared at the numbers, then at the group chat. I didn't want to humiliate her. I didn't want to turn this into a scoreboard. But I also wasn't going to let the narrative calcify, because once it did, it would follow me for years. Daniel didn't help. Daniel was cold. Daniel wouldn't even support his sister after their father died. And I wasn't sure I could live with that distortion. I typed, "Give me a second." 3 dots appeared from her side instantly. Why? I didn't answer. Instead, I took a screenshot. Not of my balance, of the transaction list. Names, dates, amounts, proof. I stared at it for a long moment, because once I sent it, the dynamic would change. This would no longer be about emotion. It would be about fact. And facts don't always comfort people. Sometimes they expose them. My thumb hovered over the send button, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I wasn't just responding to my sister. I was responding to a role I'd been assigned since childhood. The steady one, the silent one, the one who absorbs. I wasn't sure what would happen after I pressed send, but I knew one thing. If I stayed quiet now, I would carry this version of the story forever. I sent the screenshot. No commentary, no explanation, just the image. The group chat went completely still. The transactions were clear. Funeral home, $8,750. Hospital balance, $4,312. Mortgage transfer, $2,000. Utilities, $380. Dates all within the last 3 weeks. Underneath, my remaining balance for the month. Not dramatic, not flashy, just reduced. 3 dots appeared under Emily's name. Stopped, appeared again, stopped. My aunt sent a single message. Oh. That was it. Just, oh. It carried more weight than a paragraph. Emily finally replied, "You didn't have to do that." It wasn't gratitude. It wasn't apology. It was defensive. "I know," I wrote. Silence again. Then, "You could have told us." I wasn't looking for credit. That line landed harder than I expected, because it was true. I hadn't told anyone. Not to look noble. Not to hold it over anyone. I just assumed actions didn't need announcements. Emily responded quickly this time. So now you're the martyr? There it was. If she couldn't claim moral ground, she'd reframe mine as manipulation. I didn't bring it up, I replied. You asked how I've helped. She didn't answer that directly. Instead, you still make more than me. The pivot. It wasn't about grief anymore. It wasn't about funeral tears. It was about perceived imbalance. You want to compare numbers? I asked. That's not fair, she snapped. Neither is asking for my salary. The conversation had shifted tone now, less emotional, sharper. Rachel finally typed, I think we should pause. Mom sent her first real message since the argument began. I didn't know you covered all of that, Daniel. That one hit differently, because I hadn't wanted her to feel indebted. It needed to be handled, I replied. Emily responded before Mom could continue. Of course he handled it. He handles everything, that's the point. The bitterness in that message wasn't about money, it was about identity. You always get to be the responsible one, she continued. The calm one, the one everyone trusts. That surprised me. Get to? I typed. Yes, you get praise for being stable. I'm the emotional one. I'm the dramatic one. The group chat felt smaller now, less like an audience, more like a confession booth. That's not praise, I replied. It's expectation. You think it's easy being the emotional one? She shot back. You think I enjoy being the one who feels everything? I paused, because for the first time in the conversation, she wasn't demanding money. She was revealing resentment. I never said it was easy, I wrote. You don't have to, she said. You never have to carry it out loud. There it was. That was the core. She believed visible grief was heavier than invisible responsibility. She believed loud meant deeper. And maybe in some ways, she'd convinced herself that meant deserving more. I didn't ask to be the stable one, I typed slowly. No, she replied. But you lean into it. I stared at that line, because she wasn't entirely wrong. I do lean into it. It's safer there. Numbers are predictable. Emotions aren't. Dad relied on that part of me. He used to say, if anything ever happens to me, I know you'll handle it. At the time, I took it as trust. Now I wondered if Emily heard it as favoritism in another direction. You think I didn't need him? She wrote suddenly. I know you did, I replied. You don't act like it. There it was again, the accusation of emotional deficiency. I looked down at the watch sitting on my desk. Dad's watch. He'd worn it every day for 15 years. He left it to me, not in writing, just handed it over at the hospital. You're the only one who'll actually wear it, he'd said weakly. I didn't tell Emily that, because I knew it would sting. We'd both lost him, but in different languages. The group chat buzzed again. Emily, I'm not asking for charity, I just thought you'd understand. That line was softer, less sharp. I do understand, I replied. Then why does it feel like you're keeping score? I looked back at the screenshot I'd sent because maybe, in a way, it did look like a scoreboard. I'm not keeping score, I typed. I'm correcting the assumption. What assumption? That I didn't carry anything. There was a long pause, longer than any so far. Then, I didn't say that. You implied it. Another pause. Rachel sent a small message. This is getting heavy. It was, but it had been heavy long before the screenshot. It had been heavy since childhood, heavy with roles, heavy with silent expectations. Emily typed again. I shouldn't have said salary. That was the closest thing to a concession so far. But I'm struggling, she added quickly. There it was, the real ask, not framed as entitlement, framed as need that I could work with. How much do you need to cover this month? I asked. The group chat went quiet again. She didn't answer immediately because now it wasn't symbolic. Now it was practical. A number would be concrete, and concrete numbers don't carry moral weight the same way. Rent and daycare, she wrote finally. About $2,300. That was a different conversation than your salary. Okay, I typed. The chat froze again. I can help with part of that, I continued. But not because you cried harder. There was no immediate reply. Then, I didn't mean it like that. Yes, you did, I said, but I know you're hurting. Mom sent a heart emoji. Emily didn't react to that. Instead, she wrote, I just didn't want to feel alone in it. That line softened something in me, because beneath the manipulation, there was something real. Grief magnifies everything. Fear, insecurity, old sibling rivalries. She didn't want my salary. She wanted validation that her pain counted, and she chose the wrong language to get it. I don't want you alone in it, I replied, but I'm not going to measure grief. There was a long pause. Then quietly, I'm sorry. Not dramatic, not long, just 2 words. It wasn't a full apology. It didn't address the public demand, but it was something. I looked at the screenshot still sitting in the chat history. Proof. Evidence. Correction. It had done what it needed to do, but it hadn't solved everything. Because grief doesn't resolve like an argument. It settles unevenly. And I knew this wasn't a clean ending. It was just the moment the explosion stopped expanding. The group chat didn't explode again after that. It just thinned out. Rachel changed the subject to checking on Mom the next day. My aunt asked about sorting through Dad's garage. Uncle Mark suggested we rotate dinner visits so Mom wouldn't be alone. Emily didn't argue anymore. She didn't push the salary angle again. But something subtle had shifted. The screenshot stayed there in the chat history like a quiet marker, proof that grief hadn't only lived in tears. The next morning, Emily texted me privately. I shouldn't have said it like that. It wasn't a full retraction, but it was different from, I'm sorry you're upset. I replied, I know you're hurting. There was a long pause. Then she sent, I just feel like you always get to be the strong one. That sentence lingered longer than anything else she'd said. Get to, like strength was a privilege. I stared at it for a while before responding. It's not a role I applied for. 3 dots appeared. You make it look easy. I almost laughed at that. It hasn't felt easy in years. Handling paperwork while holding your breath? Standing steady so your mother doesn't collapse? Listening to doctors explain the finality of things while your sibling sobs in the hallway? It's not ease. It's containment. I don't know how to do it your way, I wrote. Maybe I don't know how to do it yours, she replied. That was the closest we'd ever come to admitting we were different, without accusing each other for it. We never circled back to the exact words she'd used. The salary, the comparison of tears, but the sting of it didn't disappear overnight. A week later, I transferred $1,000 to her. Not $2,300, not my salary. Just enough to ease the month without validating the demand. I sent it with one message. For support, not scorekeeping. She replied with a simple, thank you. No emojis, no justifications, just that. Mom eventually found out I'd covered the funeral and hospital bills. Not because I told her, because she was going through statements and noticed the charges weren't pending anymore. She called me one evening. You didn't have to do all of that alone, she said softly. I wasn't alone, I answered automatically. You always say that. There was a long pause on the line. I worry about you, she added. That surprised me. Why? Because you don't let anyone see when you're not okay. That hit harder than Emily's accusations, because it was quieter, and probably truer. In the weeks after, family gatherings felt slightly different, not hostile, just adjusted. Emily didn't make jokes about me being robotic anymore. I didn't make quiet digs about her dramatics. We were careful around each other, not fragile, but aware. There's something about death that strips away the luxury of pretending dynamics don't exist. Dad's absence created space, and in that space, old roles were exposed. The emotional one, the stable one, the one who needs, the one who provides. We'd both leaned into those identities for years because they were familiar. The screenshot didn't solve that, it just disrupted it. A month later, Emily brought it up again, but differently. We were at Mom's house, sorting through Dad's old tools. She stood in the garage holding a dusty box and said quietly, I didn't mean that you didn't love him. I looked at her. I know. I just felt like you weren't falling apart like I was. I was, I said, just not publicly. She nodded. I don't know how to do that. Me neither, I admitted. That was the most honest part of the whole thing. We don't actually know how to grieve correctly. We just default to whatever we've practiced our whole lives. Emily practices expression. I practice containment. Neither makes the loss smaller, but when pressure hits, expression can turn into demand, and containment can turn into silence. The money was never really the core issue. It was fear. Fear of carrying the loss alone. Fear of not being seen. Fear of being less loved. And for a moment, that fear came out as entitlement. I shouldn't have made it public, she said finally. That mattered more than the apology earlier. Probably not, I replied. She gave a small, tired smile. You and your screenshots. I shrugged. They're efficient. She laughed softly, not loud, not dramatic, just normal. We're not magically closer now. There's still distance, there's still tension in certain conversations. But something fundamental changed. She knows I won't accept emotional leverage disguised as morality, and I know that silence can be misread as indifference. I still wear Dad's watch. Emily still cries more easily than I do. We both miss him, just differently. And sometimes the most powerful response isn't anger, it isn't humiliation, it isn't even a perfect comeback. Sometimes it's one screenshot, clear, quiet, unarguable, not to win, but to stop a story from rewriting itself. And that, in the end, was enough. Grief doesn't invent entitlement, it exposes it. For a moment, my sister believed pain gave her ownership over my responsibility. It didn't. I didn't send the screenshot to embarrass her. I sent it to stop a narrative from forming. We both lost our father. We just carried him differently. And sometimes the only way to protect your boundaries is to make them visible.